Hey everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and this is a Sweet Stuff Saturday, recorded on a Saturday, and today I want to talk about handle design. Handles on knives are overlooked. People will talk a lot about the steel, about the grind, about the materials, but just a good solid handle, that doesn't get a whole lot of play in the knife community. But I want to point out a couple of things that seem obvious to me, but might not be obvious. So first of all, no folder will ever have a handle as good as a fixed blade, because a fixed blade, the handle is just a handle. It is not a place to store the knife. And because you don't have to accommodate that additional function, you can focus strictly on making a great handle. And so this knife here is probably my favorite knife handle of any knife I've ever handled. This is the Crine TK2 Whitetail. It's sort of his take on the Loveless Drop Point Hunter, and it is fantastic. The handle is the right size, it's the right shape, it's simple, it doesn't have any distractions, it's got a nice texture to it, it's not super slick, but it's also not really rough. Everything is just well done. The curves are well done, there's no sharpness here. The only sharp part of the knife is on the edge, which is exactly where it should be. And the transition between materials is nice. There's a little bit of a guard, so your fingers don't roll up. It is just an absolutely fantastic knife handle. I really like this knife handle. So this knife handle is, if we're taking this knife handle and saying like, this is the benchmark, where do we go from there? So one of the knives that I have in for review right now is this knife, and it's the Asher Knives Nomad 3. And it has a nice sculpted G10, but it has to have a pocket clip, and it has this channel, the blade well, where the blade rests in. And these things, they do gunk up your grip of the knife. There's just no other way around it. Like, if you could make the knife foldable and have a pocket clip, but not have all these other things on it, you totally would. So like the pocket clip and the blade well are concessions to the design. They're not features that make the knife better in hand. And so for what it is, this is a pretty good grip on a knife. In fact, I like it a lot. It's leagues worse than this knife. This knife, the handle on this knife is just so much better than any other folder, or any folder could be. So good, really good knife, folding knife handle, but not quite as good as what you'll find on a good fixed blade like the TK2. Some of the things that are obvious problems, of course, is the hot spot that the clip creates. And so, manufacturers do a bunch of stuff to try to hide it in your hand by putting it in this part of the hand where there's like a little pocket. That's not a bad idea. The other thing, some of Joe Caswell's knives have pop-up clips that kind of go up here and then snap down into the spine of the handle. John Graham has a clip here, which really doesn't do anything to modify or mess up the grip. And then there are some Lion Steels that have a spring-loaded clip that lays flush to the handle, and then you push a button on this side and it raises up. All of those things are okay ideas, but they're really workarounds for the main problem, which is the handle on a folder is doing more things than just being a handle, and so you have to make concessions. If you want to talk about the knife, the folder that I think has the best grip, I think you're going to go to this knife. This knife is the Strider PT, and it is the Strider PTCC, which means that it doesn't have a clip and that it has rounded handle scales. So this is a G10 and then titanium on the lock side. And by the way, I think frame locks are probably a detraction. I'd much rather have a liner lock or like a sliding bar lock, because again, the more things you make the handle do, the less good or the less well it performs at each one of those tasks. So, frame lock, fine, whatever, but liner lock would have been better if I had my druthers, but that's like really off trend, so you get things like this. But let's talk about why this is so good. So of course it has a blade well, which will make the handle worse, but it doesn't have a clip, which is good, and it has these rounded scales, which is also good, but really it's the shape. One of the things that I've noticed about folders is that my favorite handles all have really narrow necks, and I don't know how else to describe it, but the place where the handle transitions to the blade, this part right here, The narrower it is, the better I feel like I have control over the blade and I can do more detailed tasks. So this knife has obviously a half and half choil. See, the choil is not entirely in front of the pivot. It's like over the pivot. And as a result, you can get really, really close to the knife's edge. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't like about Striders is that they have this giant ricasso here that chews up the blade length. But when you're looking at a knife this size and it's a folding knife, you're really not, I mean, you don't need a giant blade. So I prefer to have it be sharpened all the way to the edge than to have like that much more blade length is not going to be an issue for me. But here you get choked up really well. I feel like this neck is nice and narrow, so it feels better in the hand. And then there's a flare out back here to sort of prevent your hand from sliding off the back of the knife. Just like if you look at this, right? You can see it. It's all right there. It's very, very, even though they're like totally different shapes from totally different makers, they're really quite similar. And that is an excellent, excellent thing in my opinion. And this is why this knife and probably the Spyderco Cali 3 are my two favorite knives in terms of handle grip, or in terms of handle design. Just absolutely perfect, or as good as you can get for a folder. This is perfect. This is perfect for a folder, but you know, obviously that's a caveat. Let's talk a little bit about why. So I don't like the frame locks here. So right here, this is a pretty sharp edge, and your hands, your fingers kind of like go over it, but there are times when you're doing cuts that point can get a little pokey. So if this was a liner lock, it would be a little bit better. And that's one of the reasons why, even though the Cali 3 doesn't have contoured scales, by using a lock back, there's none of those little pokey parts. So really, really good handle design on the Strider PT, good handle design on the Cali 3. A little bit worse here on the Asher Nomad, but by far better than average. But still, all of them pale in comparison to this. Really good fixed blade handle is just a marvel to behold.